The stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the dusty depot in Clifton Hill, Arizona Territory, and Josephine Katherine knew that whatever waited for her on the other side of that door had to be better than what she had left behind in Philadelphia. The year was 1881, and the journey westward had taken 3 grueling weeks by train and stage. Every bone in her body ached. Her traveling dress bore stains from spilled coffee and red dust, and her carefully pinned auburn hair had surrendered to the elements somewhere around Kansas. But none of that mattered as much as the paper clutched in her gloved hand. The letter from Zachary Everett, the rancher who had answered her advertisement seeking honest work as a mail-order bride. She stepped down from the coach, squinting against the harsh afternoon sun. Clifton Hill was smaller than she had imagined, just a collection of weathered buildings clustered along a single main street. The mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing against the cloudless sky. Heat shimmered off the packed earth, and somewhere a dog barked lazily. "Miss Katherine." The voice was gentle, almost hesitant. Josephine turned and found herself looking up at a man who stood at least 6 feet tall. He removed his worn Stetson, revealing sun-bleached brown hair and eyes the color of strong coffee. His face was weathered but kind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He wore simple ranching clothes, a checked shirt and denims, boots that had seen better days, and a leather vest. Nothing about his appearance suggested wealth or pretension, just honest work and careful living. "Mr. Everett?" she asked, her voice hoarse from dust and nerves. "Yes, madam. Zachary, please." He held the hat against his chest, a nervous gesture that somehow put her at ease. "I hope the journey wasn't too difficult. It was long, but I managed." She smoothed her skirts, suddenly conscious of how disheveled she must appear. "I apologize for my appearance. The dust from the trail. You look just fine, madam. You look tired is what you look. Let me get your trunk." He moved past her to where the driver was already unloading luggage, and she caught the scent of sage and horses, clean sweat and leather. It was not unpleasant. As he hoisted her trunk onto his broad shoulder with ease, Josephine found herself studying him more carefully. The letters they had exchanged over the past 4 months had been cordial but brief, discussing practical matters mostly. She knew he was 28, owned a small cattle ranch about 5 miles outside town, and had lost his parents to influenza 2 years prior. He needed a wife to help manage the household, and she needed escape from a city that had become a prison after her father's gambling debts had left the family destitute. What the letters had not conveyed was the gentle way he moved, careful not to jostle her as they walked toward a buckboard wagon, or the genuine concern in his eyes when he helped her up onto the seat. "The ranch is not far," he said, settling beside her and taking up the reins. "I have a woman from town, Mrs. Patterson, who comes to help with cooking and such. She prepared the guest room for you. I wanted you to know that there is no expectation of. Well, we can take time to get acquainted properly before we make any decisions about marriage." Heat flooded Josephine's cheeks. She had been so focused on escaping Philadelphia that she had not fully considered the intimacy that marriage would entail. "That is very considerate of you, Mr. Everett." "Zachary," he corrected gently, clicking his tongue to set the horses moving. "We should at least be on first names if we are thinking about being married. Then you must call me Josephine, or just Josie if you prefer. Josie." He tested the name, and a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "That suits you, I think." The ride to the ranch took them along a winding trail that climbed gradually into the foothills. The landscape was so different from Pennsylvania that Josephine could hardly believe they were in the same country. Instead of green forests and rolling farmland, there were endless stretches of scrub brush and cactus, rocky outcroppings and twisted mesquite trees. The air was dry and hot, stealing moisture from her lips. "It is beautiful here," she said finally, meaning it despite the harsh strangeness of the terrain. "Different than what I am used to, but beautiful." Zachary glanced at her, something like relief crossing his features. "I am glad you think so. Some folks from back east cannot abide the desert. My mother struggled with it at first, but she came to love it. Said there was something honest about the land, how it did not pretend to be anything but what it was." "Your mother sounds like she was wise." "She was." His voice carried old grief softened by time. "She would have liked you, I think. She always said I needed someone with backbone to keep me in line." "Do you often need keeping in line?" Josephine asked, surprised by her own boldness. He laughed, a warm sound that seemed to roll up from deep in his chest. "Not often, but I have been known to work too hard and eat too little. Get lost in mending fence or tracking strays and forget that humans need more than coffee to survive." They fell into comfortable conversation as the wagon rattled along. Zachary told her about the ranch, how it had 100 acres of decent grazing land and a small herd of about 60 cattle. He ran it mostly alone with the help of a young ranch hand named Tommy who came 3 days a week. It was not a grand operation, but it was his, free and clear. Josephine found herself telling him things she had not intended to share quite so soon. About her father's descent into gambling after her mother died, about the creditors who had stripped their Philadelphia home bare, about her younger brother Michael who had gone to sea rather than face debtor's prison. She stopped short of mentioning certain other humiliations, but she said enough that he would understand why a woman of 23 with no prospects would answer an advertisement from a stranger halfway across the country. "That took courage," Zachary said quietly when she finished. "Leaving everything familiar behind." "It took desperation," Josephine corrected. "Maybe both." He guided the horses around a bend, and suddenly the ranch came into view. It was modest but well-maintained, a low adobe house with a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a barn, a chicken coop, and what looked like a smokehouse. A windmill turned lazily, pumping water into a wooden trough. The whole place had an air of careful attention, everything in good repair even if nothing was fancy. "It is not much," Zachary said, and she heard uncertainty in his voice. "It is lovely," Josephine said firmly. "It looks like a home." The tension in his shoulders eased. He helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The house was cool and dim after the bright sunlight, with thick adobe walls that kept out the heat. The main room served as kitchen and sitting area, with a large stone fireplace, a sturdy table, and simple furniture that showed signs of careful craftsmanship. Everything was neat and clean, though it clearly lacked a woman's touch. "The guest room is just through there," Zachary said, indicating a door off the main room. "My room is on the other side. There is a pump in the kitchen for water and an outhouse out back, though I have been working on plans for indoor plumbing eventually." Mrs. Patterson appeared from the guest room, a plump woman with graying hair and a warm smile. "There you are. I have fresh linens on the bed and water heating for a bath if the poor dear wants to wash off that trail dust." "That sounds like heaven," Josephine admitted. "I will leave you ladies to it," Zachary said, already backing toward the door. "I need to check on the stock. Supper is usually around 7, if that suits you, Josie." After he left, Mrs. Patterson bustled about, showing Josephine where things were and chattering in a friendly way that required little response. The guest room was small but comfortable, with a bed, a chest of drawers, and a washstand. A single window looked out toward the mountains. The bath was indeed heavenly, even though Josephine had to wash in a copper tub in the kitchen with water heated on the stove. Mrs. Patterson helped her with her hair, exclaiming over its length and color. "That Mr. Zachary is a good man," the older woman said as she worked tangles from Josephine's wet hair. "Decent as they come. My husband worked for his father years back, and the whole family is solid folk. You could do a lot worse, dear." "I know," Josephine said softly. "I just hope I can be what he needs. You seem like a sensible girl with a good head on your shoulders. That is what a rancher needs, not some fancy lady who cannot tell a chicken from a turkey." Mrs. Patterson sectioned the hair and began to braid it. "He has been lonely since his folks passed. Throws himself into work to avoid the silence. It will be good for him to have company." After Mrs. Patterson left with promises to return the next day, Josephine unpacked her meager belongings and changed into a simple cotton dress. She had brought 4 dresses total, all practical and well worn. There was also her mother's cameo brooch, a book of poetry, and a daguerreotype of her family taken when she was a child, and everyone was still happy. She found Zachary on the porch as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He had changed his shirt and dampened his hair, clearly having washed up at the pump. "May I sit?" she asked. "Of course." He gestured to one of 2 rocking chairs. "I like to watch the sunset from here. Never gets old." They sat in silence for a while, rocking gently and watching the day end. Josephine had expected awkwardness, but instead she felt a strange sort of peace. Perhaps it was exhaustion from the journey, or perhaps it was something about the man beside her who seemed content with quiet companionship. "Can I ask you something?" Zachary said eventually. "Yes." "Why did you really come here? I mean, I know about your father and the debts, but you could have found work in Philadelphia. As a governess or a seamstress maybe. Why travel all this way to marry a stranger?" Josephine considered her answer carefully. There were men in Philadelphia who thought that a woman with debts and no family protection was fair game. I received several offers, none of them respectable. One man in particular would not take no for an answer. I realized that if I stayed, I would either have to accept a position that would compromise my virtue, or I would end up in even worse circumstances. At least this way, I had a choice in the matter. Zachary's jaw tightened. "I am sorry you had to endure that. It is in the past now." She met his eyes. "Can I ask you something in return? Fair is fair. Why did you place an advertisement for a wife? A man like you, surely there are women in town who would be interested." He smiled ruefully. "There are not many unmarried women in Clifton Hill, and the few that are have their pick of suitors. I am not much to look at, and ranching is hard work with uncertain profits. I figured my best chance was to be honest about what I could offer and hope someone would be practical enough to consider it." "You are wrong about the first part," Josephine said before she could think better of it. "What? About not being much to look at? You are." She felt her face flame. "You are quite handsome, actually, in a rugged sort of way." Even in the fading light she could see color rise in his cheeks. "That is kind of you to say. I am not being kind, I am being honest." She looked down at her hands, mortified by her own boldness. What had possessed her to speak so freely? "Then I will be honest too," Zachary said quietly. "When you stepped off that stage, I thought you were the prettiest thing I had ever seen, even with the dust and the rumpled dress. You have eyes like the sky before a storm." Her heart hammered in her chest. "I have never been good at accepting compliments. Then we make a fine pair because I am not good at giving them." He stood and held out his hand. "Come on, I will show you the barn before the light fails completely. The animals should meet their new mistress." The barn was organized and clean with 4 horses in stalls, a milk cow, and a mottled barn cat who watched them with suspicious yellow eyes. Zachary introduced her to each animal by name, and she could hear the affection in his voice. "This is Bella," he said, stroking the nose of a dappled mare. "She is gentle as a lamb. I thought you might want to learn to ride if you do not already know how. It is the best way to see the ranch. I rode as a child, but it has been years. We will go slow then. No rush." He led her back outside where twilight had deepened to purple darkness, and stars were beginning to emerge in stunning profusion. "It is different out here than in the city, quieter, slower. I hope you will not find it too dull." "I think I could use some dull after the past few years," Josephine admitted. They went inside and Zachary lit the lamps. He had clearly tried to prepare something for supper, though his attempts at biscuits were somewhat lopsided. There was also bacon, beans, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. "I should have warned you," Zachary said sheepishly as Josephine attempted to cut through a biscuit. "Cooking is not my strong suit. Then it is fortunate that it is one of mine." She softened the biscuit in the bean juice and managed to make it edible. "Tomorrow I will take over kitchen duties. You do not have to jump right into work. You should rest, get your bearings. I prefer to be useful." She met his eyes across the table. "If I am to be mistress here, I should act like it." Something shifted in his expression, a warmth that made her stomach flutter. "If you are to be mistress here," he repeated. "Does that mean you are leaning toward staying?" Josephine realized what she had said. They had known each other for mere hours, yet somehow it felt both terrifying and right. "I think I am, if the offer still stands." "It stands." He reached across the table, and after a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in his. His palm was calloused and warm, entirely engulfing her smaller hand. "But I want you to be sure. Take a week, 2 weeks, however long you need. Get to know me and the place. Make certain this is what you want." "What about what you want?" she asked. "Perhaps after getting to know me, you will decide I am not suitable." "I doubt that very much." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it made her throat tight. "But fair enough. We will both take time to be sure." They cleaned up the supper dishes together, establishing an easy rhythm that felt like they had done it 100 times before. Josephine washed while Zachary dried, and they talked about small things. The weather, the town, the best place to buy supplies. When it was time to retire, they stood awkwardly in the main room, neither quite sure how to say goodnight. "Sleep well, Josie," Zachary said finally. "You too, Zachary." In her small room, Josephine changed into her nightgown and lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night. Somewhere a coyote howled, and the wind whispered through the eaves. She thought about the man on the other side of the wall, this gentle stranger who had offered her refuge without demanding anything in return. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt something that might have been hope. The next few days fell into a comfortable pattern. Josephine rose early and took over the kitchen, preparing proper breakfasts of eggs and bacon, pancakes and decent coffee. Zachary was clearly amazed by her cooking skills, praising everything from her biscuits to her stew with an enthusiasm that was endearing. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, washing curtains and beating rugs, organizing cupboards and scrubbing floors. It was hard work, but satisfying in a way her life in Philadelphia had never been. There was something honest about physical labor, about seeing the direct results of her efforts. Zachary spent his days working the ranch, but always made time to include her. He took her riding on Bella, true to his word, leading her on gentle trails that wound through the property. Her skills came back quickly, and soon they were riding side by side, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes talking about everything and nothing. She learned that he loved the land with a fierce devotion, that he could read weather in the sky and find water by watching how the plants grew. He taught her the names of the desert flora, saguaro and prickly pear, ocotillo and creosote. He showed her where antelope came to drink and where hawks nested in the rocky cliffs. In turn, she told him about her life before, about growing up in Philadelphia society, about the books she loved, and the music her mother had taught her to play on their piano, long since sold to pay debts. She had not realized how much she missed having someone to talk to, really talk to, about more than just practical matters. On the fourth day, Zachary took her into town to introduce her properly. Clifton Hill was small enough that everyone knew about the mail-order bride within hours of her arrival, and Josephine felt the weight of curious stares as they walked down the main street. "Do not mind them," Zachary said quietly, placing a hand at the small of her back in a protective gesture. "They are just curious. Gossip is the main entertainment around here." They stopped at the general store, a cluttered establishment that smelled of coffee and tobacco. The proprietor, a balding man named Henderson, greeted them with barely concealed curiosity. "So this is the bride from back east," he said, looking Josephine over with watery blue eyes. "Pretty little thing. Zachary, you done good." "Miss Katherine is still deciding if she wants to put up with me," Zachary said mildly, though Josephine noticed his jaw tightened slightly. "I am quite pleased with the arrangement so far," Josephine said firmly, meeting Henderson's gaze. "Mr. Everett has been nothing but a gentleman." "Good, good." Henderson seemed disappointed by the lack of scandal. "What can I get for you folks?" They purchased supplies, flour and sugar, coffee and lamp oil. Josephine noticed that Zachary kept the shopping practical, not indulging in anything frivolous despite her subtle hints that she might like some cinnamon or vanilla for baking. "Money is tight," he admitted as they loaded the supplies into the wagon. "The herd needs to grow another year or two before we have real profit. I want to be honest with you about that. This will not be an easy life, Josie. We will have enough, but there will not be extras for a while." "I did not come here expecting easy," she said. "And I certainly did not come expecting luxuries. But Zachary, if I am to be your wife, you need to trust me with the full picture of our finances. I can help if you let me. I managed my father's household accounts for years." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "You want to see the books? I would appreciate it." That evening after supper, he brought out a ledger and spread it on the table. Together they went over every entry, income and expenses, debts and assets. Zachary had not exaggerated. The ranch was solvent, but just barely, with little cushion for emergencies. "You could sell some of the heifers early," Josephine suggested, running her finger down a column of numbers. "Not all of them, but enough to give you operating capital. Then use that money to buy better breeding stock. Your current bull is getting old, is he not?" "How did you know that? You mentioned him limping the other day." "And here," she pointed to an entry, "you had the veterinarian out to see him twice last month. If he is having trouble mounting the cows, you are losing potential calves." Zachary stared at her. "You got all that from the books and one comment." "I told you I was good with accounts," she smiled. "If you get a younger, more vigorous bull, you will have more calves next spring." "More calves mean more animals to sell. It is an investment that will pay off." "You are remarkable," he said quietly. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I am practical." "Remarkable," he repeated, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. The moment stretched between them, charged with something unspoken. Zachary leaned forward slightly, and Josephine's heart began to race. Was he going to kiss her? Did she want him to? Yes, she realized with startling clarity. She very much wanted him to. But he stopped himself, pulling back with what looked like effort. "I should let you get some rest. Thank you for your help with this." Disappointment flooded through her, though she tried to hide it. "Of course. Good night, Zachary." In her room, she pressed her fingers to her lips, wondering what it would be like to be kissed by him. She was 23 years old, well past the age when most women married, and she had never been kissed. Not once. The truth of it had not bothered her much before. But now, with Zachary so close yet maintaining such careful distance, it felt like a gap in her experience that was growing more noticeable every day. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Josephine was kneading bread dough when the sound of approaching horses made her look up. Through the window, she saw 4 riders approaching the house, and something about the way Zachary tensed on the porch told her this was not a social call. She wiped the flour from her hands and went outside, standing beside Zachary as the men dismounted. They wore badges, she noticed, and the lead man had hard eyes and a tight mouth. "Zachary Everett," the man said. "That is me. What can I do for you, Sheriff?" "Sheriff Warren. I am looking for information about some missing cattle. We have had reports of rustling in the area, and your ranch is on the route the thieves seem to be using." "I have not lost any stock," Zachary said carefully. "My count was accurate as of 2 days ago. Mind if we look around anyway?" It was not really a request. Josephine watched as the men spread out, searching the barn and outbuildings. She could feel the tension radiating from Zachary, though his expression remained neutral. "This is ridiculous," she said quietly. "They cannot just search your property without cause." "They can do whatever they want out here," Zachary replied, equally quiet. "The law is thin on the ground, and accusations have a way of sticking even when they are false. Best to cooperate and let them see we have nothing to hide." The search turned up nothing, of course, but Sheriff Warren did not look satisfied. "We will be keeping an eye on this area. If you see anything suspicious, you let us know." "Of course," Zachary said evenly. After they left, he stood staring at the dust cloud their departure raised. His jaw was tight, and his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "What was that really about?" Josephine asked. "Politics, most likely. There is a rancher named Donovan who owns the spread to the north. He has been wanting to buy my land for years, but I will not sell. He has connections, friends in the sheriff's office. This was probably his way of applying pressure. That is horrible. That is life out here sometimes." He turned to her, and his expression softened. "I am sorry you had to see that. This is the kind of thing I worried about when I advertised for a wife, bringing someone into a situation that could get ugly." "I am not frightened," Josephine said, surprised to find it was true. "And I am not going anywhere." The look he gave her was so full of relief and something deeper that she felt it all the way to her bones. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his palm. His hand was warm and slightly rough, and she found herself leaning into the touch. "You are braver than you know, Josie Katherine," he said softly. They stood like that for a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, and then he dropped his hand and stepped back. Josephine wanted to protest, to pull him back, but she let him go. Whatever was building between them needed time to develop properly. She knew that, but it did not stop the longing that curled in her chest. The encounter with the sheriff cast a shadow over the next few days. Zachary was quieter than usual, often standing on the porch at night and staring out at the darkness as if expecting trouble. Josephine did her best to distract him with good food and conversation, but she could feel his worry like a weight in the air. A week after her arrival, Mrs. Patterson did not come for her usual visit. Josephine thought little of it until Zachary returned from town with a troubled expression. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. "Mrs. Patterson sent her regrets. She will not be coming back to help." "Why not? Did we offend her somehow?" "No, nothing like that." He removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair. "Donovan has been spreading rumors in town, saying that I am harboring stolen cattle, that you are not really my mail-order bride but some kind of accomplice. It is all nonsense, but Mrs. Patterson's husband works for one of Donovan's friends. She cannot afford to be associated with us right now." Anger flared hot in Josephine's chest. "That is absurd. Everyone knows you are an honest man. Knowing and proving are different things. Donovan is rich and influential. If people have to choose between believing him or believing me, a lot of them will choose him." He sank into a chair, looking suddenly exhausted. "I am sorry, Josie. I brought you into a mess." She knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "Stop apologizing. I chose to come here and I choose to stay. We will weather this together." He looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. "You mean that?" "I do." "Why?" The question was raw, vulnerable. "You barely know me. You could go back to town, get on the next stage east, wash your hands of all this." "I could," she agreed. "But I do not want to. Zachary, in the week I have been here, I have felt more at home than I did in 23 years in Philadelphia. You are a good man, and this is a good life, and I will not let some bully take that away from either of us." He pulled one hand free and touched her face again, that same gentle gesture that made her heart race. "I do not deserve you." "Maybe not," she said, trying for lightness. "But you are stuck with me anyway." This time, when he leaned forward, he did not stop. His lips brushed hers, feather light and tentative, a question rather than a demand. Josephine's eyes drifted closed and she leaned into the kiss, her first kiss, this moment she had wondered about for so long. It was gentle and sweet, tasting of coffee and possibility. His lips were soft despite the hardness of his life, and he kissed her like she was something precious and fragile. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "I have been wanting to do that since you stepped off that stage," Zachary admitted. "I have been wanting you to," Josephine whispered. Then, because honesty seemed important, she added, "That was my first kiss." His eyes widened. "Your first?" "I told you there were men who made offers in Philadelphia, but I never accepted any of them. And before my family fell on hard times, I was not. I was not particularly popular with men. Too bookish, too opinionated. No one ever wanted to court me properly." She felt her face flame with embarrassment. "I suppose that makes me quite pathetic at 23. "No," Zachary said fiercely. He took her face in both hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "That makes those men fools, and it makes me the luckiest man alive that you saved that first kiss for me. I want you to know, in case it matters for your decision about marrying me, I have no experience with any of it. I will likely be terribly awkward. Josie." He kissed her again, longer this time, his lips moving against hers with growing confidence. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. "We will figure it all out together. There is no rush, no pressure. I just want you to be happy. That is all I have ever wanted." She believed him. This gentle cowboy who treated her like she was worth something, who kissed her like she was precious, who offered her a home and safety and asked for nothing but her willing companionship in return. "Ask me," she said. "Ask you what?" "Ask me to marry you. Properly this time, not through letters and advertisements. Ask me." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it from merely handsome to breathtaking. He stood and drew her to her feet, then, to her shock, dropped to one knee. "Josie Katherine, I know we have only known each other a week, and I know I cannot offer you luxury or an easy life. But I can promise to work hard every day to make you happy. I can promise to be faithful and honest and to treat you with respect. I am falling in love with you, and if you will have me, I would be honored to be your husband." Tears blurred her vision. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed breathlessly. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and this time there was joy in it, celebration and promise. "How soon?" he asked against her lips. "As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if we can arrange it." "Tomorrow it is." They rode into town the next morning, both dressed in their Sunday best. Zachary wore a suit that was slightly too tight in the shoulders, evidence of how he had filled out since it was purchased. Josephine wore her least worn dress, a blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and had her hair pinned up with her mother's cameo. The justice of the peace was a thin man named Crawford who ran the hardware store in addition to his judicial duties. He was happy enough to perform the ceremony, though he looked puzzled by their haste. "You are sure about this, Zachary?" Crawford asked. "Known the lady less than 2 weeks if gossip is accurate. I am sure," Zachary said firmly. "More sure than I have been about anything. And you, miss, you are entering this marriage of your own free will." "I am," Josephine said clearly, "completely by my own choice." The ceremony was brief and businesslike. No flowers or music or guests. Just the two of them standing in Crawford's office above the hardware store, promising to love and honor and cherish until death parted them. Zachary's hands trembled slightly as he slid a simple gold band onto her finger, a ring that had belonged to his mother. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Crawford said. "You may kiss your bride." This kiss was different from the ones before, weighted with the knowledge that they were now bound together in the eyes of God and the law. Zachary's arms came around her, solid and sure, and Josephine felt something settle in her chest, a rightness she had been searching for without knowing it. They were husband and wife. As they left Crawford's office, Josephine noticed a man watching them from across the street. He was middle-aged and well-dressed, with calculating eyes and a hard mouth. Even without introduction, she knew this must be Donovan. "Ignore him," Zachary murmured, but she felt him tense beside her. They collected a few supplies and headed back to the ranch, now truly their ranch, their home. The afternoon sun was warm, and the desert stretched endless and beautiful around them. "I am sorry there was not more ceremony to it," Zachary said as they drove. "You deserved better than a quick service with no guests." "I have exactly what I wanted," Josephine said, and meant it. "A good man and a fresh start. That is more than enough." At the ranch, Zachary carried her over the threshold, a tradition he insisted on despite her laughing protests. He set her down gently in the main room, and suddenly the reality of their situation hit them both. They were married. They were alone. Night was falling. "I should start supper," Josephine said, too brightly. "I can help." They worked side by side, preparing a simple meal of fried chicken and vegetables. The domesticity of it soothed some of Josephine's nerves, though she was acutely aware of the glances Zachary kept sending her way, the way his hand lingered when he reached past her for a plate. After supper, they sat on the porch as had become their habit, watching the stars emerge. But tonight felt different, charged with anticipation and uncertainty. "Josie," Zachary said finally, "I meant what I said before. There is no pressure for marital relations until you are ready. We can take all the time you need." She appreciated his consideration, but she also knew that waiting would only make her more nervous. "I am ready," she said quietly, "or as ready as I will ever be. I trust you, Zachary." He stood and offered his hand. She took it, letting him lead her inside. Her heart hammered so hard she was sure he must be able to hear it. In his room, which was now their room, he lit a single lamp that cast soft golden light. The bed was large and sturdy, covered with a quilt his mother had made. Josephine stood beside it, unsure what to do with her hands. "We will go slow," Zachary promised. He cupped her face, his touch infinitely gentle. And if you want to stop at any point, you just say so. Your comfort matters more to me than anything else." He kissed her, and she melted into it, her arms winding around his neck. His hands moved to the buttons of her dress, and she felt herself trembling. "Cold?" he asked against her lips. "Nervous? Me too." "You are nervous. But surely you have." She stopped, realizing she had no idea about his experience. "I have been with a woman before," he admitted. "Once, years ago. But this is different. This matters more than I can say. I want it to be good for you." His honesty helped ease her tension. As he slowly undressed her, pausing frequently to kiss her and murmur reassurances, she found her fear giving way to curiosity and then to genuine desire. His touch was reverent, patient, learning what made her gasp and what made her sigh. When they finally came together, there was pain, yes, but also tenderness and care. He moved slowly, watching her face, adjusting to her responses. And when the pain faded and something else took its place, something warm and building, she understood why people made such a fuss about this act. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest and his hand stroking her hair. She could hear his heart beating, strong and steady. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. "More than all right." She pressed a kiss to his chest. "That was worth waiting 23 years for." His chest shook with quiet laughter. "You are amazing." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, and Josephine dreamed of a future bright with possibility. The next few weeks were the happiest of Josephine's life. She settled fully into her role as Zachary's wife, managing the household with efficiency while learning the rhythms of ranch life. She learned to gather eggs without being pecked, to churn butter, to preserve vegetables for the winter ahead. Her hands grew calloused and her skin tanned despite the bonnet she wore, but she did not mind. At night, she and Zachary explored each other with growing confidence and passion. What had started as tender and uncertain became something powerful and sure. She learned that her gentle husband had hidden depths, that the same hands that could soothe a frightened horse could drive her to heights of pleasure she had never imagined. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He told her stories of his childhood, of his parents who had loved each other deeply, of his dreams for the ranch. She shared memories of her mother's piano playing, of books she had read, of the brother she hoped to find someday when they had the means to search for him. But their happiness existed in a bubble that could not last. Donovan's campaign against them continued. More neighbors stopped visiting, citing vague excuses. When Zachary went to town for supplies, he was met with cold stares and whispered conversations that stopped when he approached. One morning in early October, about 6 weeks after their marriage, Tommy the ranch hand arrived looking worried. "Mr. Everett, I need to talk to you," the young man said, his hat clutched in his hands. They went out to the porch while Josephine pretended to be absorbed in her baking, though she could hear every word through the open window. "My pa says I cannot work here anymore," Tommy said miserably. "He says Donovan has been talking, saying you are mixed up with rustlers and that anyone who associates with you will be tarred with the same brush. I am sorry, Mr. Everett. I do not want to leave, but my pa is insisting." "I understand," Zachary said, though Josephine could hear the strain in his voice. "You have to do what your father says. I appreciate you coming to tell me in person." After Tommy left, Zachary came inside and sank into a chair, his face drawn. Josephine abandoned her baking and went to him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders from behind. "We will manage without Tommy," she said firmly. "It is not just Tommy. This is Donovan's endgame. He is isolating us, making sure no one will trade with us or work for us. He wants to force me to sell because I cannot operate the ranch alone. You are not alone. You have me." He reached up to grip her hand. You should not have to work like a ranch hand, Josie. That was not what I promised you. You promised me a partnership, and that is what we have. I am stronger than I look, Zachary. Let me help. The truth was, she had already been helping more than he knew. When he checked fence lines, she came along and helped with repairs. When he needed to move cattle, she rode with him. She was nowhere near as skilled as Tommy, but she was learning, and her determination made up for what she lacked in experience. True to her word, Josephine threw herself into the ranch work. Her hands blistered and her muscles ached, but she refused to complain. Together, she and Zachary managed the daily tasks, though it meant working from before dawn until after dark most days. The isolation wore on them both. No visitors came to the ranch, and when they went to town, they were met with suspicion and hostility. Henderson at the general store still sold them supplies, but his prices had gone up, and his manner was cold. One evening in late October, as they sat exhausted on the porch, Josephine noticed riders approaching in the distance. Her stomach clenched with anxiety. Nothing good ever came from unexpected visitors. But as the riders drew closer, she realized it was not the sheriff or Donovan's men. It was a small group of Apache, led by a man who sat his horse with natural grace. Zachary stood slowly, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle by the door. But he did not pick it up, waiting to see what the visitors wanted. The leader raised his hand in a gesture of peace. He was younger than Josephine had expected, perhaps 30, with sharp features and intelligent eyes. He spoke in accented but clear English. "You are Zachary Everett?" "I am." "I am called Red Sky. I have heard that you are having trouble with the rancher Donovan." "What business is that of yours?" Zachary asked, not rudely but cautiously. "Donovan's cattle graze on land that was promised to my people. His men have shot at us when we hunt there, even though the treaty says we may. He takes water from streams that are supposed to remain open. He is a problem for both of us. I still do not understand what you want from me." Red Sky dismounted with fluid grace. "I come to offer trade." "You need help with your ranch, yes. You are alone, isolated. We can provide eyes and ears, warning when Donovan's men come. In return, you allow us to water our horses at your stream when needed, and you trade with us. Fairly, not like Donovan, who cheats." Zachary glanced at Josephine, and she gave a small nod. The offer made sense, and they were in no position to refuse help from any quarter. "All right," Zachary said, "but I want it understood that there will be no raiding from this land, no stolen cattle hidden here. I will not be made party to anything that would prove Donovan's accusations right." "Agreed. We do not steal cattle. That is white man's lie." Red Sky's expression was hard. "We take only what we need to survive on land that was once all ours." "Fair enough." Zachary extended his hand, and after a moment, Red Sky took it. The arrangement with Red Sky's people proved invaluable. True to their word, they provided warning twice when Sheriff Warren's men were planning to search the ranch. They also brought game to trade, and venison and rabbit provided welcome variety to the meals. Josephine found herself enjoying the occasional visits from Red Sky's wife, a woman called Mourning Dove who was near her own age. Mourning Dove spoke less English than her husband, but the two women managed to communicate through gestures and shared tasks. Mourning Dove taught Josephine how to make pemmican and how to cure hides, while Josephine shared her bread-making skills and offered to mend torn clothing. Through Mourning Dove, Josephine learned more about the injustices the Apache faced. Their land had been steadily taken, their hunting grounds restricted, their water sources controlled by ranchers like Donovan who had no legal right to them. The treaties that were supposed to protect them were routinely ignored by white settlers who wanted more land, more resources, more control. "It is not right," Josephine said to Zachary one night. "The way they are treated." "No, it is not," he agreed. "But speaking out about it will not make us any friends in town. Maybe we do not need friends who think that way." He smiled and pulled her close. "How did I get lucky enough to marry a woman with a conscience? You advertised for one." Their laughter was interrupted by the sound of breaking glass. Zachary moved so fast Josephine barely saw him grab the rifle. He pushed her down below the window level as another rock came through, followed by angry shouting. "Injun lover! Traitor!" Through the broken window, Josephine could see torches, 4 or 5 men on horseback surrounding the house. Her heart hammered with fear. "Stay down," Zachary ordered. He moved to the door and opened it, the rifle held loosely but ready. "You boys want to tell me what this is about?" "This is a warning, Everett," one of the men called. Josephine recognized the voice as belonging to one of Donovan's ranch hands. "Mr. Donovan knows you are harboring Apache. He says you have until the end of the month to clear out, sell to him, or face the consequences." "I am not selling," Zachary said, his voice hard. "And I will harbor whoever I damned well please on my own land. Now get off my property before I start shooting trespassers. You are making a big mistake. The only mistake I see is you boys thinking you can intimidate me." He fired a shot into the air, the crack of the rifle shockingly loud. "That is your warning. Next shot will not be aimed so high." The men wheeled their horses and rode off, their shouts fading into the night. Zachary closed the door and leaned against it, his knuckles white where he gripped the rifle. Josephine went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. She could feel him trembling, whether from fear or anger she could not tell. "We should report this to the sheriff," she said. "Warren is Donovan's man. It would not do any good." He set the rifle aside and held her tight. "Maybe you should go back east, Josie. This is getting dangerous." "No," she pulled back to look at him. "I am not leaving you. We are in this together. Remember, you could get hurt. So could you. All the more reason for us to stick together." She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I am not some fragile flower who needs to be protected from difficulty. I am your wife, your partner. Where you go, I go. Stubborn woman, you love me anyway. God help me, I do." He kissed her, hard and desperate. "I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you too." It was the first time either of them had said the words so plainly, and the truth of them hung in the air like a benediction. They boarded up the broken window and went to bed, holding each other close. Sleep was a long time coming. The next morning, Red Sky arrived with 2 other men. He surveyed the broken glass and boarded window with a grim expression. "Donovan's men." "Yes," Zachary confirmed. "This will get worse before it gets better. He will not stop until he has your land or you are dead. I am not giving him either." Red Sky nodded, respect clear in his eyes. "Then we will help you fight. Donovan is our enemy as much as yours. I appreciate that, but I do not want this to turn into a war. Too many people could get hurt." "It is already a war," Red Sky said flatly. "Donovan has been waging it against my people for years. Now he has turned his weapons on you. The only question is whether you will fight back." Zachary looked at Josephine, and she saw the weight of the decision in his eyes. She stepped forward. "What did you have in mind?" she asked Red Sky. Over the next hour they formed a plan. Red Sky's people would keep watch on Donovan's ranch, tracking the movements of his men. If another attack was planned, they would have warning. In return, Zachary would testify on behalf of the Apache regarding Donovan's illegal use of tribal lands, providing documentation of water rights and treaty violations. "It is dangerous," Red Sky warned. "Speaking against Donovan publicly." "Living has gotten dangerous," Zachary replied. "At least this way we are doing something right." As November arrived, the tension escalated. Twice more, Donovan's men attempted nighttime harassment, throwing rocks and firing shots in the air. But with red skies people keeping watch, Zachary and Josephine were always prepared, meeting the attackers with rifle fire that drove them off. The constant vigilance was exhausting. Josephine took to sleeping in her clothes, boots nearby, ready to move at a moment's notice. The joy and peace of their early married life seemed like a distant dream. One morning, Zachary came in from checking the stock with news that made Josephine's blood run cold. "2 of my cattle are missing. Not strayed, taken. There are signs of a struggle near the north fence and the wire was cut. Donovan has to be. He is trying to make it look like rustling so he can bring the law down on us." Zachary paced the kitchen, his face tight with anger. "I need to ride to town, talk to the territorial marshal. Sheriff Warren might be in Donovan's pocket, but the marshal should be impartial. I am coming with you. Josie, do not argue, I am coming." They rode to Clifton Hill together, arriving at midday. The marshal's office was next to the sheriff's, a small building that smelled of tobacco and old paper. Marshal Hayes was an older man with silver hair and shrewd eyes that suggested he did not miss much. Zachary laid out the whole situation, starting with Donovan's attempts to buy the ranch and ending with the missing cattle. He spoke plainly, without embellishment, and Josephine could see Hayes assessing every word. "That is quite a story," the marshal said when Zachary finished. "You have any proof of these accusations?" "I have witnesses among the Apache." "The Apache," Hayes interrupted. "Mr. Everett, you cannot seriously expect Indian testimony to carry weight in a legal proceeding." "Why not?" Josephine demanded. "They have eyes and ears same as anyone." Hayes gave her a look that was equal parts surprised and condescending. "Mrs. Everett, perhaps you do not understand how things work out here." "I understand perfectly," she interrupted. "I understand that powerful men like Donovan are allowed to break the law because they have money and influence. I understand that treaties are ignored and people are victimized, and everyone looks the other way because it is easier than standing up for what is right." "Josie," Zachary said quietly, but she was too angry to stop. "My husband is an honest man who has worked hard for everything he has. He is being terrorized by a bully who wants to steal his land. If the law will not protect him, what good is the law?" Marshal Hayes studied her for a long moment. "You have fire, Mrs. Everett. I will give you that." He turned to Zachary. "I will look into your claims, but I need more than your word and some Apache witnesses. Get me proof, real proof, and I will act on it." It was not the answer they hoped for, but it was something. As they left the office, Sheriff Warren was waiting on the street, his arms crossed and a sneer on his face. "Everett, running to the marshal now, that is a coward's move." "Standing up to bullies is not cowardice," Zachary replied evenly. "You have made yourself a lot of enemies in this town. Might want to think about that. The only enemy I have made is Donovan, and he made himself my enemy first." Zachary took Josephine's arm. "Come on, let us go home." They started toward the wagon, but Warren's voice followed them. "I would watch my back if I were you, Everett. Accidents happen out in the wilderness. Be a shame if something happened to you and your pretty wife." Zachary stopped so suddenly that Josephine bumped into him. When he turned, his face was controlled but his eyes were blazing. "If you are threatening my wife, Warren, you had better be prepared to back it up, because I will burn this whole town down before I let anyone hurt her." For a moment, it seemed like Warren might go for his gun. But Marshal Hayes appeared in the doorway of his office, his hand resting on his own weapon, and the moment passed. "Get out of here, Everett," Warren said, "before I arrest you for threatening an officer of the law." On the ride home, Josephine noticed her hands were shaking. The confrontation had rattled her more than she wanted to admit. "I should not have spoken to Hayes like that," she said. "I may have made things worse." "You were magnificent," Zachary said firmly. "You said things that needed saying and you did not back down. I was proud of you. Even if it hurt our case. Hayes is a fair man as far as I can tell. I think he will help if we get him evidence." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "We will figure this out, Josie, I promise." That night, Red Sky brought news that changed everything. One of his scouts had seen Donovan's men moving cattle onto their land under cover of darkness, rebranding them, and then moving them off again. "He is planting evidence," Zachary said, "making it look like I am the rustler." "More than that," Red Sky said. "He is planning a large gathering, many men, to come to your ranch. They mean to catch you with the stolen cattle and either hang you or turn you over to the sheriff. Either way, they get your land." "When?" Josephine asked, her mouth dry with fear. 2 days. "Then we have 2 days to set a trap of our own," Zachary said. The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. They would allow Donovan's men to plant the stolen cattle, but they would have witnesses hidden to see it happen. Marshal Hayes would be brought in at the last moment with undeniable proof of the frame-up. Red Sky agreed to have his people watch and wait. Zachary wrote a detailed letter to the marshal, explaining what they had learned and begging him to come. A friendly clerk agreed to deliver it secretly. The next 2 days were agonizing. Josephine could barely eat, and Zachary was tense as a drawn bowstring. They went about their usual tasks but kept rifles close at hand. On the second night, Red Sky's scouts reported movement. Donovan's men were coming with the cattle. Zachary and Josephine hid in the barn loft with Red Sky and 2 of his warriors, watching through gaps in the boards as the rustlers cut their fence and drove a dozen head of cattle onto their land. Josephine recognized some of the men, including 2 of Donovan's foremen. They worked quickly and quietly, rebranding the cattle with Zachary's mark using a running iron. It was all the proof anyone could need that this was a deliberate frame-up. "Where is Hayes?" Zachary whispered. "The marshal should have arrived an hour ago." As if in answer, they heard horses approaching from the south. Relief flooded through Josephine until she saw it was not the marshal but Sheriff Warren with a posse. "This is it," one of Donovan's men said loudly, clearly performing for the arriving sheriff. "Caught red-handed with stolen cattle, just like Mr. Donovan said." "Zachary Everett," Warren called. "Come out of that house." "He is not in the house," one of Donovan's men said. "Search the property." Red Sky's hand gripped Zachary's arm. "Wait," he breathed. The posse spread out, searching buildings. Josephine held her breath as men entered the barn below them, but the darkness of the loft concealed them. Then, finally, more horses. Marshal Hayes rode up with 2 deputies, and Josephine could have wept with relief. "Sheriff Warren, what is going on here?" Hayes demanded. "I have evidence of cattle rustling, Marshal, just about to apprehend the suspect." "Is that so?" Hayes dismounted and walked over to examine the cattle. Even from the loft, Josephine could see him note the fresh brands. "These marks look awfully new." "That is because Everett just stole them tonight," one of Donovan's men said. "Then why are you boys here?" Hayes asked mildly. "Seems odd that you would know to be here at the exact right time to catch him." "Mr. Donovan has been keeping watch. Where is Donovan now?" Hayes interrupted. "If he is so concerned about these cattle, why is he not here himself?" The man stammered, caught off guard. Before he could answer, Zachary stood up in the loft, rifle in hand but pointed at the ceiling. "Marshal Hayes, I am glad you came. I have witnesses who saw these men plant those cattle here tonight." "He is lying," Warren shouted. "I do not think he is." Hayes looked up at the loft. "You have these witnesses." Red Sky and his men stood, revealing themselves. The posse erupted in angry shouts. "Apache, I knew it." "Quiet," Hayes commanded. "Red Sky, I know you. Are you saying you saw what happened here tonight?" "I did. I watched these men cut the fence, drive the cattle, and brand them. They mean to blame Everett for crimes he did not commit." "That is Indian lies," Warren said. "Their testimony is worthless." "Maybe," Hayes said, "but I also have this." He pulled a paper from his coat. "Letter from a citizen in town who witnessed Donovan planning this whole thing in the saloon 3 nights ago. Got drunk and started bragging about how he was going to force Everett off his land. Letter is sworn and notarized." Warren's face went pale. "That does not prove anything." "It proves enough for me to investigate properly." "You boys," Hayes pointed at Donovan's men, "are all under arrest for trespassing, destruction of property, and attempted fraud. Sheriff Warren, I will be filing a report about your conduct with the territorial governor." The next hour was chaos as the marshal arrested Donovan's men. Warren tried to slink away, but Hayes stopped him, confiscating his badge on the spot. It was not a full dismissal, but it was a start. After everyone had gone, leaving the cattle to be sorted out later, Zachary and Josephine stood in their yard in the pre-dawn light, holding each other. "It is over," she whispered. "Not quite. Donovan himself got away clean, but his men will talk when faced with prison. We will get him eventually. I do not care about Donovan. We are safe. That is all that matters." He kissed her, and she tasted relief and lingering fear, exhaustion and triumph. They had survived. Red Sky approached, his expression neutral. "We go now. Our help is done." "Thank you," Zachary said, "for everything. You saved our lives. You stood with us when others would not." "That is worth something." He paused. "The offer remains. Trade between us, water rights, mutual protection, if you still want it." "I do." "Absolutely." Red Sky nodded once and led his people away into the lightening dawn. Over the next weeks, the truth came out just as Zachary had predicted. Facing prison time, Donovan's men turned on their employer, testifying that he had orchestrated the entire campaign against the Everett ranch. Donovan fled before he could be arrested, disappearing into Mexico according to rumor. With the threat gone, life slowly returned to normal. Neighbors who had shunned them began to cautiously reach out again, offering awkward apologies. Josephine accepted their overtures with grace, though she did not forget who had stood by them and who had not. Winter arrived, cold and clear. The ranch thrived under their joint management. They sold cattle in the spring at good prices and used the profit to make improvements. A new breeding bull, repairs to the barn, and yes, indoor plumbing just as Zachary had dreamed. Josephine discovered she was pregnant in March, just as the desert began to bloom. Zachary was so overcome with joy that he picked her up and spun her around despite her laughing protests. "Careful, you will make me dizzy." "I am going to be a father," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be parents." "I know. Terrifying, is it not?" "Terrifying," he agreed. "And wonderful." Their son was born in November, almost exactly a year after the confrontation that had nearly destroyed them. He came squalling into the world with a full head of dark hair and his father's nose. They named him Michael, after Josephine's brother, whom they had finally located working on a merchant ship out of San Francisco. Holding their son, watching Zachary cradle him with such tenderness, Josephine thought back to the frightened woman who had stepped off the stage over a year ago. She had been running from her old life, desperate and uncertain. She had not been running toward anything in particular, just away, but she had found something anyway. She had found home. "What are you thinking?" Zachary asked, looking up from Michael's tiny face. "I am thinking about my first kiss," she said. He smiled. "Memorable, was it? The most memorable thing that ever happened to me, right up until everything that came after." Everything after has been pretty good, he agreed. Pretty good, just pretty good. She pretended to be offended. All right, incredibly, amazingly, spectacularly good. He leaned over to kiss her, careful of the baby between them. Better than I ever could have imagined when I placed that advertisement. Better than I ever could have imagined when I answered it, she replied. Michael began to fuss, and Josephine settled him to nurse, marveling at the perfect weight of him, the trust with which he latched on. This tiny person who depended on them completely, who would grow up knowing only love and security if they had anything to say about it. You ever regret it? Zachary asked quietly. Leaving Philadelphia, coming here, all of it, not once, not for a single second. She met his eyes. This is where I was meant to be. With you. With me, he echoed, and the love in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. The years that followed were not always easy. Ranching never was. There were droughts and hard winters, cattle that died and crops that failed. There were difficult births and childhood illnesses that kept them awake with worry. Michael was followed by a daughter they named Charlotte, and then another son, Benjamin. The house that had once seemed too large for two filled with noise and laughter and the constant chaos of family life. Red Sky and Mourning Dove remained friends, their children growing up together, playing games that mixed Apache and white traditions. It was not a perfect harmony. The world was still unjust and prejudiced, but it was a start. The Everett Ranch became known as a place where all people were welcome, where treaties were honored and respect was given freely. Josephine never forgot those first tentative kisses, the gentleness with which Zachary had treated her inexperience. But those memories were joined by thousands of others. Kisses in the barn, kisses in the kitchen, kisses stolen when the children were finally asleep. Quick pecks of greeting and long, deep kisses of passion. Kisses of comfort when times were hard and kisses of celebration when they were good. Each one was memorable in its own way, but none quite matched that very first one, when she had confessed her secret, and he had made her feel like it was something precious rather than something shameful. On their 10th anniversary, Zachary surprised her by taking her back to town for a proper celebration. He had arranged for Mrs. Patterson, who had apologized profusely for abandoning them and had been forgiven, to watch the children. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, a luxury they rarely afforded, and danced to music from a piano player. "You remember," Josephine said as they swayed together, "when I told you I had never been kissed?" "I remember everything about that day," Zachary said. "The way you looked at me, nervous and brave at the same time. The way you tasted like coffee. The way my heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I was terrified you would find me ridiculous." A 23-year-old woman who had never been courted properly, who did not know the first thing about passion or romance. "I found you perfect." He pulled her closer. "I still do. Even with the gray hairs I am starting to find. Even with the way my body has changed after 3 children. Especially then." He kissed her temple. "You are more beautiful to me now than you were that first day, and you were breathtaking then. Flatterer, truth-teller." He guided her into a turn. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think I am the luckiest man in the Arizona Territory. Maybe in the whole country. I placed an advertisement hoping for someone practical who could manage a household and not complain about hard work. And I got that, but I also got a partner, a best friend, a passionate lover, and the best mother my children could ask for. I got everything I needed and 100 things I did not even know to want." Tears blurred Josephine's vision. "I love you so much." "I love you too, Josie, always." They stayed in town that night, in a hotel room that felt fancy after years of their farmhouse. They made love slowly, relearning curves and textures that had become familiar but were no less exciting for it. Afterward, lying in sheets that someone else would launder, Josephine felt a contentment so complete it was almost frightening. "What are you thinking now?" Zachary asked, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I am thinking that I am grateful. For what? For everything. For you, for our children, for this life we have built. For the courage I found to leave Philadelphia, for the advertisement you placed. For every single choice that led me to you. I am grateful too." He kissed her shoulder. "Especially grateful that I got to be your first kiss." She laughed and turned to face him. "And my last." "And your last," he agreed and kissed her again to prove it. They returned home the next day to find the children had been angels for Mrs. Patterson, according to her account, though the state of the house suggested otherwise. But Josephine did not mind the toys scattered across the floor or the dishes piled in the sink. This was the beautiful mess of a life lived fully, surrounded by love. As the years continued to pass, the children grew. Michael became a quiet, thoughtful boy who loved animals and wanted to be a veterinarian. Charlotte was fiery and independent, with her mother's sharp mind for numbers and her father's love of the land. Benjamin was the charmer, quick with a joke and quicker with a hug, making friends wherever he went. Josephine and Zachary grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies bearing the marks of hard work and time. But their love deepened rather than faded, becoming something richer and more complex than the sweet passion of their early days. They faced sorrows together. The loss of Zachary's old dog Buck, the death of Red Sky in a hunting accident that left Mourning Dove a widow, the dry year when they nearly lost everything and had to sell half the herd to survive. But they faced joys too. Michael's acceptance to veterinary college in San Francisco, Charlotte's marriage to a young lawyer in Tucson, Benjamin's natural skill with horses that suggested he would take over the ranch someday. On their 20th anniversary, Josephine stood on the porch watching the sunset, just as she had done thousands of times before. Zachary came up behind her, his arms slipping around her waist in a gesture so familiar it felt like home. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, as he had asked so many times over the years. "I am thinking about that first kiss," she said, "and how terrified I was to admit I had never experienced one before. You do not seem terrified now." "I am not. I am not terrified of anything as long as you are beside me." He turned her to face him, and the love in his eyes was as strong as it had been that first day, maybe stronger for all they had weathered together. "Well, as long as we are being nostalgic, maybe I should kiss you the way I did that first time. Do you remember? How could I forget? Gentle, sweet, like I was something precious. You were. You are." He cupped her face in his weathered hands and kissed her softly, tenderly, a perfect echo of that long-ago moment when she had been a frightened bride and he had been a kind stranger taking a chance on a mail-order marriage. The kiss was everything it had been 20 years ago and more. It was history and future, promise and fulfillment, question and answer all at once. When they finally pulled apart, Josephine was smiling through tears. "Still memorable. Always memorable," Zachary agreed. "Every kiss with you is memorable, Josie. Every single one." They stood together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The land they had fought for stretched out around them, the home they had built, the life they had created from nothing but courage and hope and love. "No regrets?" Zachary asked softly. "Not a single one," Josephine replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. Behind them, through the open door, they could hear their family gathering for dinner. Charlotte had brought her husband and their new baby daughter for a visit. Michael was home from college for the summer. Benjamin was arguing cheerfully with his siblings about something inconsequential. The house was full of life and noise and love. This was what they had built together. This was the legacy of that first tentative kiss, the leap of faith they had both taken when Josephine stepped off a stage in Clifton Hill, and Zachary had met her with kind eyes and gentle hands. She had confessed she had never been kissed, and he had made it memorable. But he had given her so much more than that. He had given her a home, a purpose, a family, a love that would last until their final days and beyond. "Come on," Zachary said, taking her hand. "Let us go join our family." "Our family," Josephine repeated, savoring the words. "I still cannot believe sometimes that this is my life." "Believe it. You earned every bit of it." They walked inside together, hand in hand, to the warm glow of lamplight and the sound of their children's laughter. The door closed behind them, shutting out the desert night, enclosing them in the sanctuary of home. In the years to come, they would make many more memories. Zachary would teach his granddaughter to ride, the same way he had taught Josephine all those years ago. Josephine would write letters to Michael full of news and love, encouraging his dreams even as she missed him terribly. They would celebrate holidays and mourn losses, work hard and rest easy, give advice that was sometimes taken and sometimes ignored. They would grow old together, their love the constant thread weaving through every day. There would be more kisses, thousands upon thousands of them, each one a renewal of the promise they made to each other in Crawford's office above the hardware store. And when they were very old, sitting on that same porch in matching rocking chairs, grandchildren playing in the yard, Josephine would sometimes catch Zachary looking at her with the same wonder he had shown on that first day. "What?" she would ask, smiling. "Just remembering," he would say. "Remembering how lucky I am." "We both are," she would correct. "We both are so very lucky," because that was the truth of it. Two people taking a chance on each other, two strangers made brave by desperation and hope, had found something that many searched for their whole lives and never discovered. They had found love, true and deep and lasting. It had started with an advertisement in a newspaper, with a frightened woman fleeing her past and a lonely man looking for companionship. It had started with a confession and a gentle kiss that made her feel treasured rather than foolish. But it had become so much more. It had become a life, full and rich and beautiful. Josephine never stopped being grateful for the courage that made her answer that advertisement, for the kindness that made Zachary place it. Most of all, she was grateful for that first kiss, the one she had waited 23 years for, the one that had been worth every moment of the wait, because it had not just been memorable. It had been the beginning of everything.